And I just want to introduce you and say that thank you for joining us today, Lily. And you represent Bishopstone and Ashley Down for the Green Party on Bristol City Council, and you were first elected in May 2021. And at 16, you became a founding member of Bristol Youth Strike for Climate, who played a key role in campaigns against the Bristol Airport expansion, organising 3 specific protests against it. And also in February 2020, you helped organise the protest attended by Greta Thunberg, which had a turnout of 30,000 people. And you are the current elected co-chair of the Young Greens. So you have an activist background as well, which is incredibly brilliant. And I'll just leave it for you to speak on your experiences.
Yes, thank you very much. So yeah, I'll start off with that bio that you've just said. Thank you. I did start as a local activist. I set up the Bristol Youth Strike for Climate movement, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with. I also, at the time, represented the UK at the European sort of summit of the Fridays for Future movement. So I was very heavily involved in spaces of young people who really, really cared about climate change and what it was going to do to them and their futures and what this country was going to do about it, which feels like a really, really big issue to consider, particularly when we're talking about local councils, and one that is not entirely the responsibility of local councils. I'd like to put that out there. So what happened because of this is I somehow ended up in the role of the person that the group would send to our local council whenever they wanted to talk to us, whether that was getting licensing permissions for protest or meeting with the mayor to talk about our demands. And the more that I interacted with the council, again, I was only 16, 17 at the time and had very little experience, the more upset I was by the attitudes of the people I was meeting with. The way that I was spoken to on occasion was really patronising and dismissive, including by the mayor of our city, and just how inclined they were to try and get me to shut up and go away. So what this did for me is to start to focus more of this anger and these protests on the council. I was starting to come up with policies that were achievable at a local level. I became even less interested in what was happening nationally and more interested in our local active travel routes and how we get more people cycling in our city, or how we make our buses work, how we make solar panels more accessible in the planning system. But not everyone was as interested in that, particularly when you're in a group of very angry teenagers. So for me, this all came to a head actually when the pandemic hit. I was in my final year of school. It all came to an end. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working in a shop 4 days a week in my local community. I was selling fruit and veg. And I just had nothing to do with my time. And I was already a member of my local Green Party, and I had worked with some councillors previously through my activism background. So I called one of them up when they were looking for paper candidates, which is why I was particularly pleased when Cam mentioned paper candidates, because I was willing to put my name forward to do that and nothing else. And I think this is a case of a lot of women in particular. We're not so keen to put ourselves forward for those positions that we think have power. And the councillor who I called said, "Oh, excellent, you're going to be a target candidate in Bishopstone where you've grown up and worked." And I went, "No, I'm not. I don't want that. I don't actually want to be a councillor. I just want to do my bit." But she wore me down, and I went in thinking, I'm 18, no one's ever going to vote for me. So I did end up winning. It was a complete shock to myself. And since then, I am the youngest councillor on Bristol City Council. I'm now 20, but I was elected at the age of 18, and I sit on Public Right of Way and Greens Committee and Community Scrutiny. And for the first year of being a councillor, I was also the shadow cabinet member for climate. And a lot has changed in my perspective and in the city, because I was also elected with I think it was the largest changeover of councillors that Bristol City Council has seen in one go. So a lot of the people that I was with were also new. A lot of people were stepping back, and it felt like fresh blood. That feels like the wrong thing to say, but it was a real change in the city. And I think that even just in that election, I achieved what I had been trying to do for 2 years previously, which was that people now thought about climate change when they were making decisions. And frankly, that was all I was trying to achieve, was that when people were making a policy decision that impacted our city, they thought about what the long-term carbon impact or climate impact was as well. It wasn't an afterthought, it was taken into account with the rest of that decision. And because of that, it meant that my reasoning for getting into politics had kind of been achieved. But what is really special, and I was talking about this a little bit in the breakout group, is that my reasons for doing it now are completely different, but in a positive way. The process of campaigning in an area that I've lived for most of my life has made me really fall in love with the community. And the things that I care about most now are the things that impact people's lives the most. You know, people make fun of councils for dealing with bins, for dealing with school places, for dealing with potholes, but that's what impacts people's lives in the day-to-day. It's what people care about for a reason. And it's made me understand local government in a different way that makes me want to continue doing this. So I thought that that was just something I'd be keen to talk about, because I think that that should be at the heart of the motivation for any local councillor. As for sort of time commitments, I'm currently a full-time student, so I am balancing this on top of doing university. And I think there's already been some questions in the chat about that, but that's another thing that's so unique about the role of a councillor, is how flexible it is. So I have been really lucky to be able to always schedule meetings around lectures and seminars, so I'm not missing that teaching time, or to have as many things in the evening as possible, because a lot of my colleagues are working full-time jobs. And I think that that is also key for getting more women into places like this. We tend to have more domestic labour, unfortunately. So that is my experience, which is not one of many. And so I understand if this isn't what everyone was looking for.
No, it's absolutely what we want to know. We want to know about you, your journey, what you do, how you got there. So everything that you said is absolutely valid. And I know that we've had a flurry of questions in. So at this point, I am going. Thank you very much for sharing your journey.